So our last two speakers of the day are Rebecca Kennison and Jeff Moyer. Rebecca is a principal of KN Consultants, a non-for-profit 501c3 organization that provides strategic and operational guidance to mission-driven organizations such as academic institutions, libraries, learned societies, scholarly publishers, and university presses, government agencies, and private foundations. Prior to working full-time at KN, Rebecca was the founding director of the Center for Digital Research and Scholarship, a division of the Columbia University Libraries Information Services. For nearly 8 years, she was responsible for developing programs to facilitate scholarly research and the communication of that research through technology solutions. Rebecca has worked primarily in the scholarly publishing industry, including production leadership roles at Cell Press, Blackwell Publishing, now Wiley Blackwell, and open access to publisher Public Library of Science, or PLOS.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks all of you for, still studying here. I said I was just not going to read my slides because I'm really tired, but no. This session is looking at, to be told, creative infrastructure. So this is a pretty creative idea, I think, and we'll see what you think. So, so some of you may be aware of a white paper that my colleague Lisa Norberg, she's the N of CAN, and I put out almost exactly a year ago now, which is looking at the scalable and sustainable approach to open access publishing and archiving in humanities and social sciences, which just rolls trippingly off the tongue. And I do urge you, if you're interested in what I'm saying within this environment, that's where we sketched out what I'm now going to describe to you a bit at this URL. It is something like a 70-page document, so it's not even a cold winter night anymore, so maybe beach reading or something. But there is a much shorter executive summary as well that you might find to be interesting. So for details, you can really go there. But that said, we've kind of morphed even from that in the last year because we spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people who were good enough to read the whole entire white paper and give us lots of feedback. So, but now there's the reality. So, as Tim said, I'm now at KN Consultants. It's been about 6 weeks since I left Columbia to go. And what we're doing here is we have the consulting business that he's described, but we are really very focused on launching the Open Access Network, which is the project that I'm going to describe here. So the assumptions that we have that come behind our model, which our model is basically how to fund the entire infrastructure of the scholarly endeavor. Not ambitious at all. The assumptions back behind there that we're working with are that the current models of open access publishing, which are very cost per unit, if I could put it that way. Article processing charges where there's an article. A book processing charge works if there's a book. But as you heard from our keynote, the containers are kind of fluid and going away and so on. So how do you support that kind of model in a business model that is cost per unit? It's impossible to do. What price a data set, for example? What do we even mean by a data set? And so on. So because of that, you can't really accommodate the new scholarly communication aspects, which usually are not contained in a unit which you price. Our second assumption is that researchers do prefer to publish in venues, most often scholarly society venues. That's why I'm very excited to be able to talk to a room full of people who are very interested in scholarly societies, as am I. I'm very passionate about scholarly societies, and as most of you who know me know. I think it's a critical component of the ecosystem of scholarly endeavors that really quite often is to the side of the way that people think about things. and our plan is to put scholarly societies in the center of the action. We also believe that the mission of the libraries is to support the dissemination, collection, organization, and preservation of the scholarly output, whatever its form. So again, not just articles and books, but whatever's being created within the scholarly endeavor. And you're going to get to hear a very interesting project along the lines of that kind of preservation aspect that we think libraries should support. We think that it's the responsibility of every institution to share the products of their research. Most mission statements, when you go to institutional mission statements, are about sharing the products of the research with the world and the community and global this. So we totally agree with that as well. And finally, we also understand that not every institution or society has the capability to support a publishing enterprise. Most of you in this room do, but a lot of societies don't have any publications at all, but they still want to contribute and can contribute. And the same thing is true of institutions, small liberal arts colleges or community colleges that might not have a publishing operation, but really benefit from the work that's being done. So our model, which is just 3 points, so this seems pretty good, is to create partnerships. So we're really looking at a partnership relationship, understanding that collaboration is the way to go, that people can't really do it alone very well anymore. Partnerships among societies and libraries and archives and others that support the common mission. We want to encourage institutionally supported publishing. So it's very often the case that people go to libraries to ask, again, for more money. And I'm going to tell you that we're also doing that in our seed funding, so I'll tell you that in a little bit. But only because people told us that we had to in the first instance. But we're really focused on institutional support. So the numbers that we quote here may look large to a library, but are probably less than the price of the toilet paper for most institutions. And finally, our model develops a sustainable financial goal to support the entire infrastructure. And I'm going to say that many times throughout this talk. Again, we're not just looking at supporting journals or books, although that is also what we're looking to support, but also the entire output of the research and scholarly endeavor. So, this is a simpler way of putting what I just said there. There's an institutional payment that goes to partnerships that results in the scholarly communication infrastructure. The institutional payment, which I'll step through in a bit, is an annual fee that's based on Carnegie, or if not in the United States, a similar kind of classification structure. So are you a research-intensive university? Are you an associate university, so a community college, and so on? And looks at the number of full-time equivalent faculty and the full-time equivalent students. The reason that we've gone for this is because those are very transparent numbers. You can look up what those are according to the Department of Education, and everyone can check to see what their number is, and that this fee is fair and transparent. So we're really going for fair and transparent here, which is more important than the price point. The price points here, we came up with 50 cents per student per year of study, but that's, as the disclaimer down there says, which I'll just highlight, is that's more of a market tolerance question. I like to tell the story of the canonical $3,000 that people pay for open access publishing, and how did it become such a canonical number. And I can tell you how it became a canonical number because I'm the one who cooked up that number by looking at what people were paying already for color charges and page charges and so on, and looking at what the average was. And so what we could say at PLOS when we were going out and saying, $3,000, well, that's what you pay already for a print publication. So surely you could pay $3,000 to have your work made freely available and open. And so it was what the market could bear, and not at all based off of what the actual cost was going to be. It amuses me greatly, I must say, to have that be now $3,000. But this is true as well in terms of what this price point is. It's what felt right, and as we were talking to people, what felt right to people. About, so $1 per student at a community college, up to $5 per student at a research-intensive university. That said, actual amounts as we roll this out might vary. There are numerous people who have asked questions about what about should public institutions pay less than private institutions? Although, as we know, if anybody's been following like Sweetbriar going down, the private institutions are not really money rich necessarily either. But it is, so there are all this discussion that's going on there. So this is just, what the actual price point should be. But the concept is one that we still really believe in, which is a transparent number that anyone can check, that an institution will know, of course, this is going to be my annual fee. So some examples of what that would look like. This is just a graph that shows. I put Columbia in there so that they could get all scared at their $162,995. But again, the library would find that to be a difficult amount to pay in addition to everything else that they're already paying. But that's not a lot of money for the institution. So, but the question is then, if you're going to go to the institution, what are you going to say to the institution? What about presidents and provosts, and how are you going to say, oh, well, you should come forward and really support not only your own scholarly endeavor, but the scholarly endeavor of the whole entire world. And other than the mission statement, which says that they already want to support that kind of environment, there are two things that open access at scale will work to address. Not address totally, but will help to address. One is the soaring cost of higher education, and any of you who may have children or grandchildren or whatever might know something about that. And also, interestingly, the challenges of lifelong learning, which was really great to hear Kino talk about earlier. So that's a major focus. So lowering the cost of education. One way that the cost of education could be lowered, if OA were the norm, would be in the cost of subscription and access management, which is a substantial cost in the system. And so those costs would not go away because for any number of reasons I won't get into here. But that you could have a decrease that could be passed along, both an industry side decrease and an institutional side decrease that could hopefully be passed along to students would hopefully then help to lower the cost a bit. And again, this is not going to be a silver bullet solution to now everybody's going to be able to have a free education, but it is a helpful mechanism toward, after all the other efficiencies are in place, what does open access not need that is a part of the system is locking people out of the system. So, and then supporting lifelong learning. Access to content that happens when you're at a university. You get used to having that access to content, and you get told how to use it, and how to find it, and how to cite it. And here's an important thing, and you're developing lifelong learning habits, and then you graduate, and they're gone. Unless you're going to grad school and then going on into the professorate, which fewer and fewer people do. So again, open access to this content is, to a certain extent, an institutional benefit. So I said here, graduates don't get lobotomies along with their diplomas. They actually do really want to have access to this content. And lifelong learners also tend to have higher paying jobs and tend to remember their alma maters a little better. So this could be, you put up some money up front, you might get even more money from your alumni at the back. So once we have the money in place, what happens? We're urging partnerships among societies, libraries, publishers, who will receive stable annual funding to support their operations. And this money can be used to convert research output that they already have to open access, so journals and books, but also to embrace those new forms of scholarly communication that are coming up, multimodal works, or collaborative systems like we heard about earlier, or more streamlined and other kinds of peer review systems, and the whole entire ecosystem from the beginning of the collaboration process all the way through to the preservation of that output. And the criteria for partnerships are you need to have a positive impact. So these partnerships, when they come together, the mechanism for getting the money is a very grant-like mechanism. So you put in a proposal for what you want to have funded, and if it meets the criteria, there's a whole review board. And again, that's all spelled out in the white paper that will look at that criteria and say, yes, you should get this money. So, positive impact, there needs to be collaboration, as I said, between one academic unit, that can be a library, one scholarly society or university press. We're bounding it that way because, again, we're trying to encourage scholarly societies and so on. There needs to be financial transparency, not necessarily external, but between and among the partners. There needs to be an archiving and preservation plan. It's an important component. And finally, there needs to be a clear MOU. So the infrastructure now comes together to create an open and dynamic scholarly information ecosystem. So what we're looking at is a very phased approach. Right now we're in the launch phase where we're raising seed funding, and then again the phases after that are clearly spelled out in the white paper. I'm getting flashing how many 9 minutes I have left here, so do go and read that there. And the key components that we have here are the real words that I want you to remember. This is what we're suggesting is very complementary and not competitive with other open access models. We're not trying to step on anybody's toes or take on projects that are working very well. That includes article processing charges and approaches and so on. We're looking to fund the entire infrastructure. We want it to be very collaborative. Our initial focus is on humanities and social sciences because that's where the greatest need is. But then, of course, we're open after that to other kinds of disciplines. And finally, we want full participation from everybody, from community colleges all the way through research institutions. But that's just all they would say. What about the money? Everything does cost money, of course. So we are, as we're now launching what we're calling the Open Access Network, we are looking for a variety of ways to get seed funding. And so we did set up a membership program. It wasn't at all what our idea was, but we were told by institutions, our library colleagues in particular, well, we don't have a mechanism to pay you. We are a 501c3, but they have no mechanism to get donations. So there was no way to do that other than set up a membership program. But it is open to everybody, and everybody in this room. So including individuals. And we have a tiered level of support. We are very serious about the $10. What we really want is to show the breadth of the network. And the monies raised do go entirely to support the Open Access Network administrative organizational infrastructure and the pilots that we want to launch to show what this looks like. Right now we are the only staff, but we do have a very, very, very excellent financial oversight committee that will make sure that we keep everything on the straight and narrow and completely separate. So, and we do, again, want to be very transparent about how we're doing our funding and what we're doing. So we do welcome everyone, as I said. And if you give individual donations, they are fully tax deductible. I'm shilling. Because you're just out there. What does she want from me? I'm going to pass a hat. But the question we get is, what about where is, you know, the tipping point, and where is critical mass, and so on. Most of you are familiar with the diffusion of innovations chart. Innovators are only 2.5%, and early adopters are 16%. In our white paper, we looked at 1,038 institutions. If we asked all of those institutions to pay whatever their fee was, and we had 167 of those come in, we would now be at the early adopter 16%. 167 institutions, for those of you who are, you know, going out and selling, is a very small number actually to start to show some traction, and 519 would be 50% of those. The ones who made the list were a variety of criteria that, again, it gets spelled out in our white paper, but it's a nice representative group. Let's just say that. So if we could convince that number to come on, we would feel like we were now at a critical mass. So questions, comments, suggestions, thoughts, everything is totally, absolutely welcome. And you can follow us on Twitter and communicate with us in all kinds of ways. Really, thank you at the end of this very long day for sitting there and looking at me like, please don't pass me.